One word. Simple. Simplicity.
Incomparable.
This is phenomenal.
Breathtaking. It's like a perfect balance. It gives you a calmness in your spirit to just be yourself here, relax and enjoy the space.
From the moment that they walk through that front door, there's a feeling within Ellerman House.
They can feel the warmth, they can feel the sincerity, they can feel how genuine we are, and they can see the passion in what we do.
And it's about taking care of the people around you and something in a truly South African spirit. And that's what Ellerman House is about, the truly South African experience.
Ellerman has become a custodian of what South Africa has to offer, being able to share that with our guests on all spheres. The art is a great example of that, where we've got this collection that represents a history of South African art. You get the whole changing landscape that has taken place in South Africa.
Walking through the property, looking at the art collection, you will see the works that adorn the halls. Every single piece on every single wall or every single sculpture here on property is from a South African artist.
The same with the wine tastings. You go through to that beautiful terroir wall and you can actually learn about the whole wine region. I mean, it's so incredible.
We've got this beautiful wine gallery with a beautiful space, and every little part of this space actually tells a story. From the floor to the walls to the wine tasting, there's a story behind everything.
Our chefs source local ingredients. Everything is sustainable, everything is organic.
Cape Town is a mother city, so it's probably one of the original melting pots, I think, and that's why food is such a big thing. We've got so many different food cultures all meeting at once, and I think if you look at the way family comes together in the kitchen, I think that's probably makes the kitchen maybe the heart of Ellerman House.
We really are a family here. Our staff members, all the way from the highest up, from the CEO all the way to myself, to the housekeepers, to maintenance. The passion and the care that everyone has and everyone takes here at Ellerman House is really what makes us who we are, and we could never be Ellerman House without the staff.
It's the staff, it's the people, it's every one of us that makes it Ellerman House.
The property is the property, and the features are the features, but it's the staff that touch the hearts of the guests that make it special.
And now heading on to 31 years, what is as luxurious and welcoming and delightful a hotel property as there is on the planet. Ellerman House, which is our home this evening for Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and a very special edition, both because of the evening and because of my rather special guests. There are two of them. One is a person, one is a bottle of wine that's got the world up and dancing as of yesterday when the new release touched down. First of all, the Ellerman House, why are we here? Well, tonight, an event that I've hosted on a number of occasions. Tonight, I'm a very happy guest at the event. It is the Art Angels auction, the Harris family's Click Foundation, run by Nicola, which does extraordinary work around South Africa using science, technology, mathematics to promote education, to get kids learning, to get them mathematically and IT literate, and to give kids from parts of the country where there often is not much by way of support or resource, and afford those kids the opportunity to get an education and to break free of the constraints they may currently have. It's a wonderful platform, and tonight's a wonderful evening. Lots of art going under the hammer, lots of very generous people coming along to support, and the perfect location in which to do it. It's also the perfect location, though, to drink some wine, because the Element is so well known for its art collection. Paul Harris is a very enthusiastic collector. He is also an enthusiastic collector of wine, and the wine cellar here at Ellerman House, which I know well, is extraordinary. It's one of the most striking on the planet. I love it. And it's an appropriate place as the home of not just wine, but luxury wine and fantastic South African wine to raise a glass to one of the benchmark South African wines. Over the last 2.5 decades, Vilafonté has gone from Mike Radcliffe's vague dream to one of the most established and successful wine brands in South Africa, and one that does extraordinarily well right around the world. The awards that have been won everywhere by Vilafonté are testament to just how well this particular wine project has gone. And today I have as my special guest, you'll be meeting in just a moment, Chris de Vries, the winemaker at Vilafonté, along with the brand new release. The Series C from 2021 was released yesterday. Crates of the stuff disappearing to the far corners of the world. I've got a chance today to taste it, to rate it, to see what it's like, and to see if it's quite as good as Greg Sherwood says, because Greg has been raving about it. I suspect he might just have got it right, but we'll find out for sure in just a moment. Before I introduce Chris, though, from our very special edition of Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows from Ellerman House, let's have a quick look at some wine news. Now that there is a surfer who also makes a little bit of wine from time to time, Craig Vessels, out at Restless River. This was up in Johannesburg on Wednesday morning at the Peach Hotel. We had a tasting with Craig running through the new wines, the Ave Marie Chardonnay, as well as the Le Luc Pinot Noir. And then that wine that still has people raise an eyebrow in disbelief if they've never had it before and can't quite believe that Cabernet Sauvignon is coming out of the Hemel Valley. It's Cabernet Sauvignon, a very unusual story. And normally from that first budding, you've got about 100 days. That's your ideal number until you want to be picking your grapes. Craig goes up to 180 days at times. Such is the cool nature of the Hemel Valley. And yet the wine comes through not just unscathed, but comes through majestically. And this time and again is a wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon, that sits amongst the very best in South Africa. The new vintages are exceptional. The Ave Marie's a little more linear, a bit tighter than last year. Last year's one was rock star stuff. This is also exceptional, but it's got some more French feel. It's not quite as expressive as some previous ones, but it's certainly not worse for that. It's just a little different and still delightful to drink. That Le Luc you can have by the gallon, and the Main Road and Dignity, the two Cabernet Sauvignon vineyards that come together to form that cab, are once again in excellent form. Just the three wines, but gee, are they three exceptional ones. And also some tastings. This was with the Canoncop team. 50 years since that first vintage came out under Jan Boerland Coetzee. 1973, we said hello, Canoncop. 2023, we raised many glasses to Canoncop. Tuesday night, again up in Johannesburg. That was some of the Cabernet Sauvignon you can see on the right there. The 96, the 2001, and that 2010 was possibly the wine of the night. We also drank some 88 Pinotage, which was remarkably fresh and had a delicacy to it. There's the wine there. We don't often ascribe Pinotage of this kind of era to having a lightness of touch or a delicacy. It's normally fairly heavy blue collar stuff, but this still, 35 years on, remarkably alive, and it was a lot of fun to drink. In fact, the 2001, just to its right, I felt tasted older than that 88, which was in a cool space. Look out for some of these Canoncop wines on the Dan Really Likes Wine store soon with Norman Goodfellows. And then the Dan Really Likes Wine charity auction, that is coming up in just under 2 weeks' time, Tuesday the 14th of November at Strauss in Houghton, and it is your chance to not just buy some terrific wine, and we've got wine from everybody from Vilafonté with us tonight. We'll touch on that wine a little later. Mullineux, we've got Savage, Ardie Badenhorst, we've got incredible accommodation from Farsight at Tybosch, and the new apartment at Kearmont, and the new farmhouse at Harbrielskloof. The selection is broad. I think we're on about 60 lots. You can come and join us. If you're in Johannesburg, tickets are available through Norman Goodfellows. 350 rand a head. That includes your wine and canapes for the night, and the chance to bid on lots that will go via the Nickel Foundation to Reach for a Dream, to the Pinotage Development Academy, and to the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust. So a good reason to come along. But if you can't make it on the night, you can watch live on Strauss, bid live on Strauss, and win some of those lots we have up for you in just under 2 weeks' time. So the Nickel Foundation is hosting that event. The Nickel Foundation has also been working very hard on another project. Christmas is frighteningly close. I suspect when I get back to Johannesburg at the weekend, my wife will have a Christmas tree up, if not several. She's very big on Christmas, which means she's very big on this project. I've partnered up with the Johnson Foundation and with Johnson Workwear to create the Jumper for Joy. It is a Christmas jumper full of Bridget Jones overtones. Remember Renee Zellweger, Colin Firth in their Christmas jumpers at the Christmas party? Well, we've gone with something similar, and this is being sold across South Africa, and all the proceeds are going to Reach for a Dream once again and to the Johnson Foundation, which does terrific work in communities across South Africa. Here's a look at what we're doing. Hi, I'm Dan Nicol, and this Christmas through the Nicol Foundation I'm working with Johnson Workwear to produce the Jumper for Joy, and we're really excited about this because not only does it look extremely cool, it's also going to be helping a lot of young people around South Africa, because every jumper sold through the Johnson Workwear stores, 23 across South Africa, or online at johnsonworkwear.com, where delivery is free, the proceeds are going to two great causes. One of them is Reach for a Dream, changing the lives and making dreams come true for young children with life-threatening illness and their families as well, supporting them. And then the Johnson Foundation is also changing lives, empowering young people and getting into communities and doing some extraordinary work. So simply by buying this jumper, either for yourself, as a Christmas gift for your whole family, for your whole staff, you're not only going to look seriously awesome, but you're also going to be helping so many young people this Christmas, and through the Jumper for Joy, spreading joy this Christmas. Thanks for your help, thanks for your support, and I look forward to seeing you wear one of these this Christmas. Well, there we go. The Jumper for Joy. I can see you looking good in a Jumper for Joy, Chris de Vries.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see myself in one, and the wife.
And the great thing about them is they're quite dark, so when you spill your Christmas red wine, they're going to absorb it all. Welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you on. And what's a very exciting time of the year? There are the Peter Balsers of the world, who release 300 wines a week. And then you get the guys who are a little more, I won't say discerning, but you're quite specific on what you make. You've got 3 wines, and one of them yesterday said hello to the world. It's a big day for Vilafonté.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, absolutely. Our latest Vineurs release, our Vineurs guest right here.
Aha.
2021. There we go. Series C.
Fantastic. Hey, I've asked a couple of winemakers some question over the last little while, because there are a few wines that have come out. Thinking to Craig, who we saw earlier from Restless River just a couple of days ago. You're experienced winemakers. You've made loads of wine. You do this every year. Surely it must get a bit boring. Yeah, everybody says no. Still goosebumps. Still gets me excited and more than a little nervous.
Absolutely. I suppose it's you get one chance. It's not like beer brewing. You're doing it one shot in the year, and every year is different. I suppose it's those difficulties during the vintage that make it exciting.
Well, you've got vintages each year. They're always slightly different. And in 2021, I've got no doubt there'll be specific personality to it. Before we dive into the wine and meet it officially, let's go back a little and tell a bit of the Chris de Vries story before the Vilafonté story. Yeah. How did your path and that of the Mike Ratcliffe empire intersect?
I suppose it's a history that started with an internship, if you will. I was finishing up my master's at Stellenbosch University, and I had this dream of getting to California, working with some top Bordeaux marques in California. And I'd read up about this neat little project that was, obviously over time it's grown with traction. And I heard about this project focused on producing 3 wines. And so I started off with an internship at Vilafonté in 2014. And I actually worked for 10 months. Usually interns stay for 3 months, just for the harvest. Mm-hmm. Obviously made an impression, and they asked me to stay on. I really needed those last 2 months to finish up my dissertation. So I begged my pardon. I impressed Zelma suitably, and she made some phone calls to California, to Opus One. And I actually had 2 vintages, 2015 and 2016, that I worked with Michael Salacci. So that was incredible.
That's, I mean, not just California, internationally, that's a pretty big opportunity.
Yeah, and life-changing. And obviously I had to come back to South Africa, back to my love, who I'm now married to. But also, while I was in South Africa, I worked for 2 South African marques, producing excellent Bordeaux. Neil Ellis, and working with Warren Ellis, 6 months in 2015, and Lariche Christou in 2016 before going to California.
That's a fair amount of experience in the right kind of spaces to be coming into making Vilafonté. Was that always the leading? Were you always somebody who felt that Bordeaux style red wine, this is where I want to find myself?
Certainly, that was absolutely the direction I was heading in, and I always knew I'd come back to Vilafonté. I never knew it would be that soon. And Zelma approached me in 2016 in March, mid-harvest, with Lariche. And she said, well, I know you're heading back to California, but wouldn't you consider cutting your contract short? So she made another phone call to Michael and begged my pardon at Opus One. So I suppose
you ditched Opus One for Vilafonté.
I did. I did.
I think Vilafonté are very, very happy with that particular call. How important is it, given the style of wine that you're making, that I don't want to say it's international in style, but certainly international in appreciation, to have had that time somewhere like Opus One to get to round off the education and to get that experience before coming back?
Absolutely. It was certainly a transition in getting a more worldly approach to winemaking. Also exposure to some of the best wines in the world, and certainly needed before settling down to my role as current winemaker.
So to go over time at Opus One, on the back of all of the studying, you're back working with Christo and the Lariches themselves, like the Ellises, the real benchmarks of Stellenbosch wine. To then step into this Vilafonté space, it's a big one to take on. How difficult was it to make the decision based on where you felt you were in your career and whether or not you were ready for this?
Oh, it was an easy decision. I still remember vividly the moment when I got the email from Zelma, and I was reading this. My wife was in the room next door at the time, still girlfriend, and I suppose I made an eek, and I was like, wow, this is happening way faster than I thought. Then the next step was meeting with Mike. And again, one of the conversations he had with me was, he said to me, and at the time it didn't sit well, but it actually makes perfect sense. He said I was high on enthusiasm and lower on experience. And absolutely, but that made up for it. And it certainly gave me a drive to where I am today.
The Vilafonté story has a few pillars to it. It's incredibly well marketed, and Mike wrote the book on marketing wine. We know that, and he does an excellent job of positioning and telling that Vilafonté story. And you've got some great people behind it in terms of Zelma, and it's got that backing to it. But you can't just go and say, right, I'm going to make a luxury wine and market it brilliantly if you don't have the wine to back it up. How much pressure did that put you on, knowing that you were coming into a space where the Vilafonté name is right up there, and you've got to make sure that you've got the wine that delivers on that story?
Yeah, some pressure, but I suppose one of my best traits is that I'm a perfectionist, and I'm probably harder on myself than most others would be on the product I'm producing. So the ultimate gatekeeper was me. I had excellent mentorship and support all the way. So I never felt like I could fail.
Marketing the wine needs to ensure it's got the right person making it, but then that person needs to have the right stuff to work with. Tell me a bit about the terroir, the grapes that you are working with, because you're not going to be able to deliver this kind of wine unless you've got something special to play with.
Oh, you can't produce these wines without those vineyards. It is really some special stuff. And it's not just a one-man band. It really takes some team effort. Obviously, the design of the vineyards in the 1998 year of inception was thought through thoroughly, and that's saying too little. But year on year, the complexity of the vines goes up. The experience that we have as a team adds to the last. We've got tomes of records on that single site. It's such a small vineyard, and it's roughly 93,000 vines. But between myself and our wine grower, Edward Peterson, he's been with the mark for 17 years now. He knows every one of those vines. So it's special soils, it's pure focus and devotion to the wines that we make.
And just a note on those soils, it is the age of them that's inspired the third wine, the Seriously Old Dirt. It sounds like a really cool story, and it's a really nice, slick piece of marketing. How much does it affect the actual wine though? How much has the age of this terroir allowed these vines to develop as they do?
If I can put it colloquially, it's the perfect handbrake. Because a vine, you want it to struggle. You wanted to have that, well, a come to Jesus moment, just in order to produce fine grapes rather than growing lushly. And between the soil, subterranean drainage that we've installed, and pinpoint irrigation that allows us to give the vine water when it needs, but only when it needs, and building up that constraint, it's the perfect mix to make small grapes with intensity.
You're watching a special edition of Dan Really Likes Wine from Ellerman House with Chris de Vries, winemaker at Vilafonté. Amongst those watching, Liz Mayer sending a good luck message. I'm not sure that's the show for Art Angels. We'll take it either way. Liz, thank you. Lovely to have you watching. Denzel Jonathan Swartz is watching. After Zertendal doing a terrific job is Denzel. Beautiful project. All the best for the night. Denzel, thank you very much indeed. And Jeremy Nell, struggle is to settle them properly amongst thirsty friends. I think many people can identify yourself as well, I'm sure. Let's have a look at these two different wines. We're talking about the C tonight, but just for people who are perhaps new to the Vilafonté brand, they see a Series C, they see a Series M. Okay, it sounds kind of cool. I'm having a guess what it might or might not mean. What's the differentiation between these two wines?
I suppose it's in those two letters, the C and the M. Apart from that, they are two distinct personalities. So the Series C, Cabernet being the leading variety, distinctly more potent. The Series M, Merlot and Malbec driving the blend, and altogether more sumptuous, more fruit-driven wine. So it's two different occasions, if you will. But the Series M and the Series C clearly divide the room. There's always a preference for one or the other. And our small vineyard produces these two really beautiful styles of Vilafonté.
And with those styles, before we jump into this particular new vintage, how much of a playbook do you work by per vintage? This is M, it must taste like, or is the case of, right, I think this year, this is going to give us the best wine, so let's run with that?
So we're certainly a terroir-driven wine, and we don't downplay the vintage. So every vintage is different. We're trying to showcase the best of the vintage. And what is a blend? It's also the flexibility to blend to what is the best in that vintage. So oftentimes, coming back to Series M, Merlot or Malbec could drive the blend, but it's never on the back label. We actually decided to take the blend characteristic off. So that we're recognized for a style, a personality. So each year we keep true to that style of the Cabernet blend, and the blend makes less difference.
On then to 2021, and a wine that, if I think back to about a year ago, sitting in Johannesburg, a hotel with Mike, we had some 2020 Series C for breakfast, and I highly recommend it for breakfast. A great choice. I got the day off to a roaring start. And Mike made a comment that I think was subconsciously sitting in my head anyway. We brought it to the fore, and it leads nicely into conversation on the style of this wine. I think because of the luxurious nature of the brand, the way it is positioned, there's often a thought for people, especially those who haven't had a huge amount, that, okay, it's going to be a big, lush, quite aristocratic and overpowering wine. There's certainly an aristocratic feel to it, but it's a lot more elegant. It's a lot subtler than people might imagine, and it's not a punch you in your face, big, hard-hitting red wine. No. It's certainly got a lot of strength and character, but it's also got wonderful restraints. And I think the word you used, point on air, which is such an important word of wine, it's got balance.
Yeah, absolutely. For a wine's longevity, ultimately balance takes the guessing game out of it. If a wine at release is balanced, more often than not, it's going to remain balanced. The intensity, the length, those both add to the longevity of the wine.
All right. The longevity of this wine, it's got both a very long lifespan and a very short one, depending on how far out of reach you can keep it from people, as Jeremy now mentioned there a moment ago. Talk us through this 2021 and what you think of it.
So I suppose this bottle has a definite hole in it, so the longevity is unsure.
All right. So, starting of what we're drinking, what is 2021 saying to you as a winemaker? What have you been able to give us from this vintage in this wine?
So 2021, I suppose one of the words that comes to mind of the vintage of the growing season is it was full of calm, where oftentimes vintage is a frenetic time of the year, very exciting for winemakers and wine growers. But 2021, the weather was distinctly different from prior years. The drought conditions that had been ongoing was broken. If anything, we had a really wet spring into early summer leading into the vintage. And that brought about much larger vines. Harnessing that growth potential was more difficult, more challenging. But I suppose the growth was still balanced. And leading into the actual harvest decision-making, the weather cooled. It was a vintage void of any heat waves, which for the Southwestern Cape is unheard of. During February, one most often experiences these heat waves punching above, sometimes into 40 degrees in Paarl region. And it was completely void of heat waves. So it was full of calm. The harvest kicked off, I think, 3 days later than usual, but absolutely within our normal timing, second week of February. And then I suppose it was, instead of being condensed into a 3-week window, which is normal for Vilafonté, harvest continued for 28 days. So it had these windows of calm. The flavors in 2021 were absolutely incredible. The berries were just bursting with flavor. The color was off the charts. At Vilafonté, we're testing for the potential of the color even before we make the wine. And wow, the numbers spoke volumes. So we actually had to extract with more delicacy. And those windows between harvesting actually gave us another capability in the vineyard to do in-bunch sorting. So unheard of. We always finish with a bunch and berry sorting in the winery. But in the vineyards, we had even more time to go through our bunches in the vineyards and remove what was an outlier. An incredible vintage.
Which I think it's something we often gloss over a little, and that we kind of see your job as being in the cellar making wine, but so much of it is being out there, interacting with the grapes, with your viticulturalists, and working out, if he's a winemaker, right, what's ready, what do I need, when is it good to go, and making some pretty important calls before the first grape has even got into the cellar.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the call on the rain? Because that is, for me, that's a terrifying one if I was a winemaker, because the rains come down. Okay, well, I can either get the grapes in now before that rain gets into the system and starts diluting my grapes and changing potential alcohol levels, or I can be brave and keep going with it and hope it's right. How tricky is that, and how was this particular vintage in that context?
It certainly is tricky. And funny enough, our site, that small Vilafonté vineyard, we oftentimes refer to it as the island of Vilafonté. So we've got, small mountains around us, Simonsberg being larger, but we're kind of in a rain shadow. So you'll see rain coming, it'll pass over the vineyard, and it'll stop in and around those hills and mountains. And nothing will fall if a few drops, a dust wetting on our vineyard. So we actually welcome those few drops, washes the dust off the grapes, And because we've got such fine control over the irrigation and the water resources to those vines, it doesn't worry us. We're also 2 to 3 weeks earlier than many of our competitors, and we avoid much of the cooling off in March. So this vintage, we were particularly lucky in the fact that we avoided the rain.
When you release a new wine, we know the varietals that lead either the M or the C because of the name.
Yep.
But Vilafonté has never been particularly big about trumpeting. It's this percent of this and this percent of that. And you're very good at just creating, here is the style.
Yes.
But you do know what percentage of something, what percentage of another. At what point does that start to take place? As the grapes are in, you immediately think, oh, this is definitely going to be a Cabernet Franc dominated one, or is it a more gradual process as you get to know and understand the vintage?
I suppose you do get an understanding of the vintage, but there are specific lots, specific vineyards that lend themselves more to a Series M or a Series C. And then how we handle them in the winery, even the decision of oaking, which cooperage to use, which toasting, the length of time in those barrels. But ultimately, the decision to blend is only made 8 months after the individual variety wines have been in their barrels. So we allow them to express as individuals, their personalities. For example, we've got 5 different Merlot vineyards, each a hectare or less, each one distinctly different. And by vinifying them separately, by aging them separately, you're able to use them in different proportion at time of blending.
It's art, this really, isn't it? Because I'm sure there's a lot of science to it as well, but the gut feel.
There's a lot of feeling.
Just kind of imagining you dipping your finger into a barrel. Oh yeah, okay, this one can go there, and just that process. And I'm sure as every vintage goes by, as your understanding of the Vilafonté process, the Vilafonté vineyards, and you kind of know where they've been, where they might be going, it does make the job a little easier.
It does. It does. So something Zelma told me early on was, she said it's going to take you 3 years before you think you know something about the vineyards and their personalities. 5 years before you actually get a decent understanding of them. And then probably after that, you're going to get a vintage that throws you a curveball. That was 2022. And then from there, one becomes quite familiar with the blocks.
And this constant sense of being a work in progress. You've got the 2021 released, 2022 is now on your horizon. It'll be released this time next year. 2023 has already begun its process, and you're looking at the vineyards now, starting to get a sense of what might come for 2024.
Exactly.
Those are a lot of grapes to be juggling.
Makes the job interesting. So everyone thinks, oh, there's one busy season in the year. As you say now, there's certainly many balls in the air at any one time.
The success of Vilafonté is not just great for you guys, it's great for South Africa and have this kind of wine. Going around the world is terrific. It lifts the sense of expectation and it lifts the sense of anticipation when these wines come out. And they're going out all over the world. As a winemaker, set aside the normal winemaker humility, which is built into the DNA of all winemakers, it must make you really proud when you see something come through that here, bang, big chain of New York steakhouses and our wine's got onto it. Great restaurants, Michelin starred in Belgium, bang, our wine is on it. It's a real endorsement of what you've done.
It certainly does make one proud, but equally so, it makes us, as winemakers, it makes us proud when we see one of our peers touting the name for South Africa. And I suppose you could say a raising tide raises all boats.
Well, you're very much part of that tide. And you do it with a wine that has got 2 jobs to deliver. And I've had this conversation with many winemakers. I still don't quite know how you get it right. Because you have a wine that 2 years after you harvested it is more than approachable. It is drinking beautifully. And it's got all that Greg Sherwood said about it and more. And yet, you're giving me a bottle, Mike's giving me a bottle, and you know that the unspoken request is, have this, but don't you dare drink it for the next few years at least. Yeah. Ideally, I want to be drinking this in 10 years' time, maybe 15 years' time. striking that balance between something we can happily have a glass of now, and yet still in 15 years' time, to back go, gee, this has become absolutely amazing. As a winemaker, is that the toughest part of the job?
Certainly. And I suppose one of the luxuries as a blend is one has a second chance to finesse, rather than having a single variety wine made from a single block, where the vintage makes a bigger difference. But certainly consistency at this end of the market, it has to be there. But having a vineyard like we do, it certainly makes my job easier.
Grant Sauls is watching the show at the moment, tasted the new vintages at Winex. If you're at Winex and you missed these, you're allowed to go and kick yourself for the next 10 minutes. And then Grant Sauls following up, looking forward to the auction on the 14th, where, of course, Vilafonté is one of the rock star lots. That's the Dan Really Likes Wine auction, 12 days time at Strauss up in Johannesburg. We've got some older vintages of the M, so the sibling to the Series C. It's a great lot. We're very grateful for it, and it allows whoever does buy it, it might well be Grant because I know he loves Vilafonté, whoever does buy it to dip into a history lesson of Vilafonté. How often do you have that history lesson? How often are you, all right, I'm opening a 2003 just to get a sense of what that wine was, where it is now, and not just for the sheer enjoyment of it, because let's be honest, it is going to be fun to drink, but to inform you as to the broader Vilafonté picture.
So I suppose at blending, every year in November, we will dip into some older vintages just to see where we've been coming from and where we're going. One has to have a clear image of both. And one of the best examples of exactly that, some weeks ago in September, we did a full vertical of Series C for some critics and some of our winemaking peers as well. So that showcased 20 years of Vilafonté. And it was pretty special.
Can you pick one from all of those that even made you go weak at the knees?
Oh, it's tough to pick one. But I certainly was surprised by some vintages that I had not tasted. 2008, we've got very limited stock. It was a tough year. We declassified much of the production, and we only have a limited library of it. But even in that tough vintage, I was surprised. I suppose that's rude of me to say, but Zelma had a discerning blending in a tough vintage. So even those tough vintages, we are able to produce a top wine.
I will drink a bottle as most winemakers will, and we'll enjoy it. We'll comment on how it might have grown or developed as we think it might. It's often a bit of conjecture. You, I'm sure, will take it to another level because it's a history lesson. It's a guidebook of what's gone before. Do you feel yourself as you're drinking a glass of 2008, having little light bulbs go off and, yeah, okay, I see where that came from. I see what that's happened.
Absolutely. You can even see some lineage. You can see how in the newer vintages where younger blocks have added vibrancy, but you can still see the DNA of Vilafonté from that site. You can see with greater density in the wines because of the greater age in the vines, more complexity. So it's an incredible privilege to taste older vintages. It's a time capsule, and it reflects that vintage.
Just as our 2021 is a time capsule now, and we'll be talking about this when we sit down in 10 years' time and talk about that next vintage. As you go forward, I think the 25 years so far have been a process of evolution, as all wine stories will be, both the changes of terroir and seasons, but also people's tastes and different winemakers. The path forward for Vilafonté, as you see it, as Mike sees it, as the brand sees it, the horizon certainly looks bright and exciting. What specifically do you see as the way forward for Vilafonté?
So I suppose one of the things that attracted me to Vilafonté was the singular focus. So if anything, we're not going to expand the range. It's the beauty in Vilafonté is giving this singular expression from that site, and rather than seeing interest in something else that could do well, it's producing these to the best of our capability.
And doing so with a great deal of fun and enjoyment. And I guess if you ever get to a point where it's not fun to make it, where you've lost that excitement, goosebumps, that's the time to hang up the winemaking gloves and just move on. Not that I can ever see it happen.
Nope.
I want to go back just before we wrap up and have one more word about the sea. Just this career of yours. You've come into a fantastic space, and you've taken Vilafonté, I think, to another level. And Mike will be the first to agree with that. Was there a moment in this wine career, a particular spell, a particular engagement, a particular time that you felt really flipped a switch with you as a winemaker and allowed you to take the kind of step forward that now has you sending Vilafonté around the world so successfully?
Oh, I suppose one of the switches in my decision to become, well, to study winemaking, it wasn't actually opening the bottle, but being teased by a bottle, if you will. One of my uncles, he was gifted a bottle of Opus wine. And I always saw this bottle, and he spoke about it highly. I think it was an anniversary gift by his wife, my aunt. And yeah, that just flipped a switch for me. I needed to see California go and work for Opus One. And I'm happy I did. It brought me back to South Africa, and I'm currently making wines that I'm super proud of.
Dare we say the Opus One of South Africa?
Well,
I said it, not him. Grant Saul saying, I agree about the older vintages. I'm currently drinking 2012 Series C and 2014 Series M, and that is amazing right now. If you know Grant Sauls, he literally means he's got a bottle in each hand. He's alternating between the two of them. Very quickly, people are, like Grant, coming to our auction. That cross-section of vintages of the Series M from Vilafonté, as subjective as you obviously are. It's still a pretty cool lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the old vintages. I suppose I love producing the young wines, but I love drinking them older. So yeah, that's a pretty special lot.
All right, look out for it. And if you can't be there in person, the auction is on Strauss Tuesday, the 14th of November. Tickets available if you'd like to join us in person at Norman Goodfellows. Final with Chris on this wine, on our star attraction tonight. Somebody's watching the show. They've never had Vilafonté. They've never had a Series C. They're looking at the glasses, they're seeing the smiles on our faces and hearing us talk about it. What would your words of introduction be to somebody to take that step, get hold of the bottle, and begin their Vilafonté journey?
So I suppose, as you mentioned, one might expect this big brute of a wine, but our wines are full of subtlety. They're made to speak volumes without shouting. And it's a wine made with balance. It's drinkable in its youth, but it's something that one can sell it with pride too.
If we can keep it.
If you can keep it.
Always the challenge. Chris, it's another cracking vintage. So to you and your assistant Mike and Sophia and the team, thank you. Thank you for sharing it with us. Congratulations on a fine delivery.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's another one to add to this wonderful history of Vilafonté, another great chapter, and one that, again, you want to keep, but good luck trying to do so. Chris, thank you. Really appreciate you coming to Ellerman House. A very special show today. I am off to join the growing crowds outside. It is the Art Angels auction in support of the Click Foundation. I should be enjoying that this evening, possibly with the last of little glass of Vilafonté Series C. It is 21 vintage. It is available now at Norman Goodfellows in very small amounts to get there quickly. And it's another great wine from a great winemaker who's taken the best of America and improved it here in South Africa. Chris, cheers and
thank you, Dan. Thank you to your followers.
There we go. We'll see you back on Monday's live show with Norman Goodfellows when we celebrate some of the winners at the Wine Mag Awards, including the Winery of the Year. Who will it be? Find out on Monday. Thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.
Cheers.